gonna get started. If somebody pops in, that's all fine and dandy. So, morning. I'm going to apologize in advance. I've only looked at this presentation one time in a year, though. So I might be a little rusty. I'm gonna show this just so. I will first apologize if you hear wild animal sounds during this presentation. It is coming from a small child in the room over there. He likes to forget there's people here, so at least once or twice I will expect it. So good morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk a little bit about growing herbs and some of the things that you can do with them and how you can preserve them so that maybe you can get more out of them. As someone who deals with, people buying plants and growing things, lots of people grow herbs, but a lot of people don't efficiently use them. Or you have a lot of people who don't grow them at all, and they're missing out on a lot of the benefits that they bring to a space, whether it be a landscape or a vegetable garden. So we're going to kind of cover a lot of ground today. If you have questions, you can feel free to interrupt me at any point in time, or if you want to wait till the end, that's perfectly fine. So why should we grow our own herbs? First and foremost, herbs are probably, in my opinion, the one thing that you can put in the garden and you can actually get your money back, very, very simply. When you go and you buy store-bought herbs, you buy them, you bring them home. How long do they last? Not very long at all. So when we have something out in the garden, here we have a unique opportunity, because as most things, you have annual and perennial herbs. A lot of things that are even annual herbs here can tend to thrive most of the year, and a lot of them will come back. So it's not something you always have to replant every year. So you can have one plant that continually provides you something. So you have very, very little inputs and a lot of output coming from it. And you have a lot of natural benefits that are going to help you succeed in growing other things in the garden. I always, until I really got into this and, 5 or 10 years ago, and really started messing with a lot of this more on my own. Growing parsley was the thing that made me realize how beneficial herbs were. I had one plant and I could hide behind it. I could probably have gotten in the middle of it. And at that point, it just made me realize that why do I ever buy this? Because I have one $3 plant turned into virtually a whole entire year's supply if I preserved it and used it right, depending on how you like to use it. Now, granted, we might not always be able to have it fresh, so the goal here is to give you some ideas of how you can prolong your use here towards the end. As with anything, if we're growing it ourselves and we're controlling everything that goes into it, freshness, flavor. If we're following natural or organic practices and we're being very soil conscious and we have a diverse garden, then we're going to have things that have better flavor quality. How many of you have grown something at home, tasted it, and you're like, man, this tastes a lot better than what you buy? Freshness is it. And then also what you put into the soil. One of the topics I attended Mike Sarant's talk at the Master Gardeners in Orange on Thursday, where he talked about how providing really good inputs to your soil and creating a healthy soil creates a healthy plant. And when a plant has better sugars and better health, then it's going to be more flavorful. There's compounds in there that provide flavor. So how we treat our yard, our environment, and our soil plays a huge role into how these taste. And these here, the longer they sit up here that we picked today, the flavor is going to degrade over time. So freshness, being able to take it, use it, or preserve it in a manner that helps you capture this flavor is going to be much more beneficial than just buying it. 'Cause I can tell you, I throw away a lot of herbs that I buy if I have to buy them. Sustainability, environmental benefits, growing your own. Herbs come in all kinds of silly packaging. You buy some things that come in these little plastic packs. You're being eco-conscious. You're avoiding pesticide exposure, or you're avoiding inputs that you have no idea what went into growing this. And that's, for me, that's the whole reason why I grow anything, is having a clear understanding of what went into what I'm consuming and what's going into my soil. It makes me feel very good when my kid runs out and just grabs something and eats it, and I don't have to worry about what actually was in there. A topic that we're not going to cover a lot today, because honestly it's something that I have just never studied enough, but there's lots of great books and such out there, lots of great resources, but you have health and medicinal benefits. I mean, herbs at one time, before we ever came along, were the medicine of the world. So you can get all kinds of anti-inflammatory benefits, digestive aids, gut support. So they can be something that can really aid you health-wise. Interestingly enough, our health is directly related to bacteria that are in our gut. Gut health helps us mentally, physically. So consuming things that support health in a natural way can make you healthier and make your life a little bit more enjoyable. Number 5, to me, when it comes to gardening, because a lot of people don't really grow herbs, not as much as I would like to see, or they'll grow 1 or 2 things that they know they'll use, and they leave all these other ones out. But it creates diversity, and diversity is what typically is lacking in the common landscape or home garden. We have greenery, we have fruiting plants, but we're leaving out things that provide color, flowers, pollen, and nectar. And then when we have gardens that are lacking those types of things, then we begin to have natural issues like pollination issues, where we're growing like a fruiting squash or cucumber. We get people, they come and they're complaining because there's no pollinators, but when you look at their space, it's lacking that natural diversity that will attract beneficial pollinators and also attracting beneficial predators. Because at the end of the day, having a pest-free garden or space is quite unrealistic. It's like trying to grow a home lawn, which is so important to so many people for whatever reason, and trying to grow it weed-free. It's not natural. Having no pests, having no diverse species of plants is not natural. You let a space be taken back over by nature. Does one plant take it over? No, it's an eclectic species. So we want to bring things in that are going to help us be successful in creating the fruits and vegetables that we may want. Yeah, we want to harvest herbs, but we also we want to have those pollinators, and we want to have beneficial predators. We need checks and balances. It's just like you think about the mammal world. Certain mammals eat other mammals. There's inferior and superior species. The same thing happens in the insect world. We don't want an abundance of any one given thing, even if it's beneficial. So we want nature to be able to control itself, and that's why herbs, to me, are one of the most important things that you can put in your garden. Does any of this make sense? All right. Honestly, I find that most herbs are genuinely probably the most beginner-friendly item that you can put in the garden. Most of them will grow rather carefree. I don't find most of these to be difficult. If you have a quick, concise understanding of their watering and sunlight needs, you can keep most of these growing with little to no effort. Basil, being probably one of the most popular herbs, absolutely to me the simplest. Planted 2 basils last year, they all died. Now I have 25 basils at home. I didn't do anything. They're growing in the exact same spots. They've spread, and we've culled out some, but now we have an immense pollinator attractor. Not just like your common Italian basil or Genovese basil. Those are all right. I mean, they're most people know them from the culinary aspect, but when you get into basils, like your cinnamon, like lemon basil, African blue, ones that will retain taste when they flower. Your standard Italian basil, if you let it flower, it begins to change the flavor profile of the leaf, and most people don't like the way it tastes. So if you don't constantly cut on it and keep it from flowering, the taste changes. So if you buy different types of basil, you'll get flowers all season long that'll be covered up with a wide array of pollinators. Even African blue basil, we've done it once, and we went out at nighttime looking for something my kid left outside, and it's just covered up in moths. So even things that we don't correlate with gardening that are not visible in the daylight, there's a whole world at night that needs similar things. So we're creating that diversification with something as simple as basil that we can use. Mint is one that is incredibly easy. It's one that I don't recommend that you plant in your garden. Plant it in an adjacent container or stage it, because mint will take over everything. I put it in a bed one time and it grew circular roots all around. It filled the whole bed up with roots. I was able to clean it out, and I knew this when I did it, but I wanted to see how invasive it was going to be. Mint can root from a pot into the ground or other places, but those smells can help repel other insects. A lot of these have aromatic compounds. You take basil, you muddle it, or you take mint, muddle it. You get those aromatics that you can use personally to make teas, things that we like. They also can disrupt insect senses and help you kind of control things that are happening in the environment without actually having to do anything. When we want to get into like pollinate or predator attraction, your parsley family, parsley, cilantro in the fall, dill, fennel, those will attract beneficial insects, but they also are great for attracting beneficial predators like parasitic wasps, lacewings, things that are going to come in and maybe eat or disrupt some of the other insects we have. Some of these are going to be something that you can plant one time and it'll be there for as long as you water it, and sometimes even if you don't. To me, the two simplest herbs as a beginner you can do, rosemary. If you can kill rosemary, you got to come see me, because this. If you're killing rosemary, you're over caring. Rosemary is almost like a succulent. Forget it, abuse it, leave it alone, and it will flourish. I have like an upright version back here in the garden. I haven't watered it but maybe once in 6 months, and it's still just fine. All this rosemary I brought here today, this is like maybe a tenth of what I could have harvested and still had plant left from a trailing type. I planted this on the side of a raised bed, and I let it hang over the edge. It hangs on the ground, and it's about this big around, and it's there all the time, year round, fresh rosemary to do whatever I want. Oregano is another one. Very, very carefree, simple. Some oreganos are going to be more like a carpeting type, so it's going to be a flat ground cover, which is also really good when you're planning out your space. You can use a ground cover type herb like that as a living mulch. So you can help prevent weeds and other things in the garden by having that covering the flat surface when you're planting around other taller growing items. Now some of these are going to take space. The rosemary, the trailing variety, doesn't take a lot of space from you because it's spilling out of a bed. I didn't bring any today. Like dill, I have one dill plant. Last year, I definitely could have hidden in it. It was so big. It's died all the way back. It's now massive again. So some of these, one plant is all you need. A lot of people come and they overplant some of these herbs, not realizing the size and the amount they're going to get. Last year we dried about 1/4 of the dill from the dill plant we had, and I have a quart of dried dill. I don't even really like dill, but I don't know what in the world I'm going to do with a quart of dehydrated dill. So a little bit goes a long way with a lot of these. So keep that in mind. Don't overplant. Don't waste all your space, but some of these can be staged out. We have at least 1 or 2 herbs in every bed, and they're staples. They're always there, and I'm always planting around them. I don't need to come and buy them every single year like a lot of people do. Here's just some examples of some of the stuff we have at home. You know, you can do a lot of these, like up on the top right of the small pictures. That's mint in a container, really, really small container. It will do a little better if you give it a big container because it will dry out really fast. So you got to keep that in mind when you're container growing herbs. It's going to dry out faster. It is going to need more nutrition. You have things like here's parsley right below the container. You got a swallowtail caterpillar here. So some of these are going to bring in beneficial pollinators long term. They're going to come in, they're going to get stripped and eaten, and we're going to be like, oh, they're tearing my stuff up. But long term, we're providing a diverse ecosystem that is going to make our garden successful. So that parsley plant got stripped all the way down. It grew back. My dill plant 2 years ago, it got eaten to nothing but stems. It grew completely back, but we probably had like, I lost count on how many swallowtail butterflies we ended up seeing coming from that one plant. So not only are we providing ourselves these things, we're providing nature host plants that are going to increase our long-term success. And some of these things, as simple as it may sound and as silly as it may sound, this kind of stuff is what I account to long-term being able to grow completely pesticide-free, whether it be organic or not, in the last 2 years. We haven't touched a single chemical in the garden in that long of a time, and we're going to keep going. But we keep it diversified with this and then with flowers. So I'm going to skip past it. All these things could be theoretically grown indoor. How many of you grow indoor plants? Not a lot. So some of these can be grown indoor. They're going to be more compact. They're going to need a little more care. But the most important thing, if you do choose to grow some of these indoors, use the ones that you're going to cook with, like constantly, that you can cut on, like parsley. You can keep them small, but the light has to be right. You want to make sure you're getting morning sun, and it's got to be like right up to it. You know, like how many of you think in this room the light right here is fairly bright right now? There's no lights on in this house. If I turned them on, you wouldn't even be able to tell. There's actually 0 light that is going to be accessible to a plant from this window because it's on the wrong side of the house. If I open up that door here by Shane, that room is extremely bright facing the southeast to southwest side. It's going to get a lot of morning to midday sun, bright sun. It's going to keep my plants from getting leggy and stretching. If I put them right here, they're all going to just keep reaching and reaching and reaching, and I'm never going to be able to provide enough light. That's why I have like grow lights in my seed starting cabinet, because I don't have anywhere in here where I can get enough natural light to make a strong plant. And if our plants begin to get real spindly and long, then they're going to get weakened. They're going to be stressed. So we need to make sure if you are deciding to grow them inside, it's got to be in a controlled environment. You got to have consistent light, consistent water, consistent temperature. You know, you can keep a lot of this, you know, I bring this up because the winter time, you know, when a lot of your herbs will die back. It's a simple way that you can grow some things and have fresh, you know, a small selection of fresh herbs inside without having to preserve. But overall, outdoor is going to be a lot better because you got natural light. A lot of these things will thrive on the outdoor side of things in filtered light. All of this stuff, or all the stuff that I brought from my own garden, are all in filtered light under the canopy of trees. They don't get any direct sun at all, but it's not enough to be qualified as shade. And they grow really vibrant, really thick, squatty. So if you have them out in full sun, they will thrive, but you're going to require more inputs from you as far as care, as far as watering, feeding. Is when you get into the hot times of the year, plants become stressed, and a way that a plant resolves stress is by they use more nutrients, they use more water, so the resources become thinner, and you may need to supply more as you go along. All your herbs are ideally going to need 6 to 8 hours of sun, full sun. If you only get a lot of afternoon sun and it's really extremely hot, consider looking at your environmental ways that you can add some form of shade. People think, oh, shade's going to not give me enough sun. It's actually going to reduce some of the really hot UV rays that will stress your plant. Southeast Texas sun is not like sun in other places. It's much hotter. It's much more stressful for your plants. One of my participants in last year in a lot of my classes always told me they started putting up shade cloth after we talked about it, and they even put a shade cloth over their okra plants. And the okra plants under the shade cloth produced more than the ones in the full sun. And they didn't do this on purpose. They were covering something else that needed stress relief. So it kind of goes to show you that just because you have full sun, sometimes it's too much. You also need to be mindful of when you're looking at sun and where your garden is positioned. Is it positioned near any kind of reflective surfaces? A lot of people will put gardens near the house. You want it somewhere accessible. If it's near any kind of window, you can get reflective heat, and you can really stress a plant, especially something that doesn't get, most of these don't get woody like a lot of your vegetables do. So it can be a little more difficult. So make sure you keep it away from like real reflective surfaces that'll radiate extra heat. If you're doing them indoors, you can always put artificial light. Just make sure that light is 2 to 3 inches above the plant to keep it from getting leggy. You may have to adjust your light height, and you want it directly over the top. If you have light on either side, it's very similar to this window. It's going to reach towards the accessible light. Almost all your herbs, they're not going to like wet feet. They need well-draining soil and even consistent moisture. It's not much different than growing any other vegetable, and that's why they work very well intermingled with everything else. The only one that does not want water, and like I said, if you can kill this, you're doing something, you're giving too much love. I strategically make sure that I don't plant things that have really high water requirements around rosemary, because rosemary could almost go without being watered for long periods of time. So make sure either if you do plant it amongst other things, maybe build it up, put it in the center of something and dome it where the water will shed out. If you plant all your herbs in one bed, plant this one higher than the rest of them if you can. Watering for herbs are really no different other than rosemary. There's no magic amount of water. The watering needs for every plant is going to change with every season. It's going to change month to month. Stick your hands in the dirt, become one with the dirt. And if the top couple inches of dirt are dry, and maybe the plant's wilty, it's kind of giving you signs that it needs water at that point. But if you can stick your fingers down deeper in the soil and you have a well-established plant and your hands come out damp and tacky and the plant still looks perfectly fine, it is not necessary to continue to water. Oftentimes people water too much. Most of these plants are only needing 1 to 2 inches of water per week. That's not a whole lot. Some people are watering every single day, and at some points in some gardens that may be necessary, but you need to adjust your watering needs based on your space and the feel and dampness in the actual soil. So how do we get to point A to point B? A lot of these can be seeded, some of them a lot easier than others. Things like parsley, cilantro are very simple to seed. Others like mint, maybe a little more difficult, less common to find seeds. Mint, rosemary, a lot of these can be propagated. You can take a cutting, you can root it in water, and once it develops a little bit of root, you can plant it out. So you can multiply a lot of these things. Some of them you can just let grow. Like I mentioned earlier, basil, you can let it grow and it'll seed itself, and then I can dig them up because they never fall in really tight clusters. They're all over. I can dig them up and I can move them around, give them to somebody else. Water propagation, that's kind of how, like, you can see most of these, we're keeping these from getting wilty really quick, just in water. Simple, clean water. If the water begins to get like discolored or murky, you can trade out that water. Put some fresh, clean water in. And this is how you can preserve your herbs if you're cutting them fresh and you're going to use them later in the day. You're out cutting, preserve them this way with water until you're ready to use them. For woody type cuttings, if you wanted to propagate like a woody cutting, I could probably use like a rooting powder. I could get this to root if I wanted to. Just rooting hormone, it's going to help promote root growth. But overall, you find most people are going to plant seedlings. Most people don't mess with herb seeds. As long as I've been doing this, I can buy 1 quarter-pound can of herbs for bulk seeds for most all of them, with the exception of parsley and cilantro, and I will never sell all of them in a given season. Most people buy plants because it's easy, it's accessible. Your variety diversity is much greater. When you come to a local place, like myself or other independent garden centers, what you can find in seed is often not like crazy diverse. You can find more varieties in plants. You can also find varieties out there that are not available, very accessible. Like African blue basil is probably my favorite basil, but I can't go buy that anywhere. I either have to find somewhere to order it online or find a cutting from someone else along the way and propagate it. If you get some of these and you do put them in containers, they will get root bound like other things, especially mint. So if your plant begins to struggle and you're continually having to water, just like anything else you grow at home in a container, you might need to repot it, put it in fresh, loose soil, stimulate the roots by breaking up that root ball some, put it in some new soil, a bigger container, give it some room to grow. I guess we will watch these. So this is kind of an example of, like, at one point, our home garden, we had over 53 species of plants. Our garden is slightly smaller than the size of these 2 rooms. It's not like all one space. We have beds spread out. We had walking paths at one time. We had a big tree in the middle. But the point here is that, like, you can put a lot of things in a small space. Don't block all of your plants in sections. If you don't have a lot of room, grow things like, put 1 herb here, put some veggies here. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Put different things in different spaces so that you have the ability to better control pests, better mitigate different disease and pests, and you have the ability to coordinate things together with colors. All that stuff was not grown in. So when this was all said and done later on, this is kind of just an example. Later on in that season, we went back out and we found things like fritillary caterpillars growing. We have a passion vine, not edible, but beneficial. We got the swallowtail that's on the dill that's overhanging near the passion vine. So we have things like assassin bugs that are out looking for things like aphids. We have solitary bees. We have wasps. Wasps actually can pick up a worm and carry it off to feed on. We have lacewings, earwigs, all kinds of just different pests. We even have things like amphibians. We have lots of lizards that will eat pests. We have certain areas where we let things overhang to attract amphibians, frogs, toads that are going to eat their weight in insects as well. So it just kind of goes to show you we're using all these different things, with herbs being a very central focal point, to create space for this to happen. And with this, we're able to grow pesticide-free, and we're able to create all the fruits, the veggies, whatever it is that we want out of the garden, just by having diversification. Um, Overall care, I always recommend keeping your garden natural, organic. I use the term organic loosely because we live in Southeast Texas. The air we breathe is probably not organic. But again, it falls back on creating a space that you control the inputs, and we're doing everything we can to create a healthy soil, which creates healthy plants, which create healthy people. So fertilizing with slow release organics that support soil health, that support a microbiome under the soil, and doing so consistently. A lot of times in the garden, people don't fertilize enough. They're fertilizing the plant in their mindset. And that's a marketing standpoint that I've learned over my 20-something years of doing this, that we don't fertilize plants, we fertilize the soil. When you look at a fertilizer, what can a plant do with this? Anybody have any idea? What's in this jug? A plant can do absolutely nothing with this because it can't consume this. So it shows you that you have to put things in the soil that can benefit the actual soil life that we can't see. We rely on bacterias, fungi, actinomyces, protozoas, all kinds of things that we learned about in school when we were kids that we don't care about anymore, or that we were taught as adults that are bad because of health. We rely on those to break down nutrients and make them available to your plants. So get yourself on a regiment where you're supplying good inputs to the soil that actually give you long-term soil health, and you'll have long-term success with growing herbs or anything for that matter. I try to keep things simple, and I'm not saying my methodologies are always the best, but I like to grow things with a mindset of a very busy person, because I am that. I don't have time to garden. I fertilize probably about once every 3 months from the beginning of, around February. Before things begin to grow, I begin to kind of put things into my soil ahead of growing and ahead of things coming back. And I'll do so about every 90 days up until almost the holidays. The wintertime, I don't typically put anything out because I'm not growing a whole lot. I'll have something growing, but not a lot. But you want to keep yourself on a regiment and provide good inputs into the soil. All these items that I have up on the table, they can get large, they can get very unkept. But the simplest way to maintain your herbs are to consistently prune them. If you don't prune them, they're going to have a real natural look to it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't prune half of mine. I just let them go, and I get what I want when I want. But some of these things can get massive. They can get really big, so you can keep them in check. Things like basil, you can keep cutting on them and make them bushier, smaller, more compact. So that's a simple way to not let it overtake your space. As I mentioned before, sometimes one of these will take up a massive amount of area. If I plant one African blue basil in a 4x4 bed, and I planted it in the middle and I just let it go and I never prune on it, it will take over that 4x4 bed alone by itself, and I will have no room for anything else. And while that's really cool, I don't need that much basil. So I can keep it compact so that I can plant other things that will benefit from the flowering stages of that particular plant. When it comes to pest and disease, the majority of these plants up here, you're not going to get really any kind of negative pests come to this. What you're going to get is you're going to get pest repellent, and what pests you do get are going to be life stages of beneficial insects. So when you do develop issues or you see something eating it, do your homework, look and figure out what it is, because at the end of the day, if any, to be honest, but they're going to bring you pest repellent, they're going to bring you pest prevention, they're also going to bring you remedies that you can use around your space or home.
Do any of those herbs repel hornworms? It's hard to watch a hornworm eat your whole plant.
No, I mean, but at the same time, at some point, certain, a hornworm makes a really beautiful moth, and it is a pollinator for other things, but you have to outweigh, okay, am I going to get my tomatoes, or is this hornworm going to stay? So you got to weigh out the pros and cons, but some things you can't prevent. It's just natural, and they don't always come. Like I noticed, like my swallowtail butterfly caterpillars, I don't get them every year. My Gulf fritillary caterpillars, I don't get them every year. They don't always find my space and my plant. So, but I always have it out there in hopes that they will. So now we get into what can we do with all these. This is all from one harvest, from probably the equivalent of what my garden space at home. But half these came from 2 raised beds by the post office here in Nederland, and the other half came from my house. Were all harvested last night or today. So I mean, you don't need a whole lot. I mean, I probably could have got 10 times more rosemary if I wanted to, way more parsley. So how can we utilize these things to preserve them or actually get something out of them? For me, one of the easiest ways and the most longevity that I can get out of it, because I buy them all the time and I use them all the time, is dried herbs. A dehydrator is immensely useful. They're a really, really easy way to preserve your herbs. That's what I do the most, because when it comes down to time, I don't have a whole lot of time to like cook and process and do things. So I want things that are that I can reconstitute, rehydrate, that I can put into cooking without having to go and purchase. And like I mentioned earlier, I got a quart of dried dill. I don't even really like dill, but I mean, I could make all kinds of dressings. I can make all kinds of pickles. I've got enough to do everything else I want that can benefit some of the other things I am growing down the road. So dehydrating is really, really simple. Dehydrators are actually relatively inexpensive. Even really good ones, $100 to $200. The one I was supposed to have today that was going to be up here, I got on sale for like $140, and I could probably, if I like pulled the stems off these and placed them in there, I probably could have put the majority of this stuff in there at one time and been able to break that down. So a lot of those things, what we'll do is we'll dehydrate them, we'll break them down, and then we'll put them in a food processor to make them into a fine powder. Other items we might just chop finely and then put them in the dehydrator, like chopped parsley. So there's different ways that you can break those things down to put them into your dehydrator. We can also, if we don't have a dehydrator, we do this a lot as well. We'll take bundles of these herbs, and then we'll get a bunch of these sprigs of any given one, and we'll do this the old-fashioned way. We have like a little spot on the wall in our kitchen, and we will tie these up upside down, and we'll hang them on the wall, and they'll stay up there until they naturally dry in a slow fashion. And what that does, that allows all the moisture to be out. You got to be really sure that all the moisture is escaped out of here, because any retaining moisture when you're drying something is what's going to cause like rot or decrease your shelf life, get moldy. We do this all the time with rosemary, and oftentimes, like if you dry it in certain ways, some of these leaves are going to turn brown. They might lose their color, but you can still grab them and you can still smell the aromatics from it. We've cooked with them, we still get the flavor. So sometimes it doesn't look as pretty as what I might have bought in the store, because I don't have all the commercial fancy dancy stuff to do it, but it still serves its purpose. And you can do that with almost all these herbs. You can dry them just by hanging them and just let it go slowly. We can freeze them, so we can take things like cilantro, parsley, some of our herbs that may have a little bit higher water content or a bigger, less succulent leaf. We can rinse them. We can kind of muddle them a little bit, or some people call it bruising, where you gently, you can press on them. What that does is it's going to release the oils from the leaves. That's what's going to, where you're going to get your flavor compounds, your aromatic compounds. Then you can put them in oil and you can freeze them. So you can use it for cooking, like whether you want cilantro or rosemary, you can freeze these with oil to use with skillet cooking or anything like that. That's an easy way to preserve a lot of your herbs, especially like basil. You can make pesto, freeze it, have it for long periods of time for using in all sorts of cooking. You can also use an oven for dehydrating. Ovens are really, really tricky because really and truthfully, they're too hot. When you're drying herbs, you're really looking for like a 95 to like maybe 105 degree temperature. And your oven, most of the time the setting is going to be like 150 to 170 is the lowest. And it will cook it really, really fast. And you don't want to heat it too hot because you're cooking out all those oils and things that you want that are going to bring the flavor. We've done it. It's okay, but I definitely don't recommend it. It's not the easiest to do. It's very easy to make it go too far. And then I went through all this trouble and then I'm mad because it didn't work out. One of the ways that we can also preserve or utilize, not necessarily preserve, but we can use these, mint, lemon balm. How many of you make like herbal tea? Herbal tea, you can do it. You can go out, you can cut mint, you can cut lemon balm. You can use almost all these in teas. Chamomile, cut them, you bruise them to release the oils, and you steep them in water. Being somewhat of a coffee nerd, I learned a lot about tea over my years, and owning a coffee shop. Like I know more about tea than I care to know, to be honest, because I'm not really a tea drinker, other than just black tea. But if you're going to make an herbal tea or like a mint tea at home, quick tips that can make you get the best flavor out of it. Very, very specifically, 200 degree water. Everything on the internet will tell you to boil it. Boiling is too hot. Very, very minute degrees of temperature make huge impacts on how things taste because the extraction you get out of the leaves are different. So most of your herbal teas out in the world, like hibiscus teas, flower teas, fruiting teas, you can use 200 degree water and steep it for 5 minutes exactly. Time and temperature are incredibly important when you're making tea. And if you want to realize how much impact it makes, play around with it. I always do this. I make all my employees at my coffee shop go through a taste test with espresso. It's a little different, but if you get boiling water and you steep it, and if you get exactly the 200 degree temperature, and then we go way down lower where it's not hot enough, it is all over the spectrum from burnt to smooth and just right. Even if you don't like espresso, it's approachable, to like a crazy astringent bitterness that you're just like, it's sour. And that's what most people, just something as little as 5 degrees on either side can make a massive difference. So when you're making things at home, a lot of people don't know that they don't like herbal teas or things that are steeped in water because they don't know the right way to make it. And those variables, they change what is extracted out of the leaves. You get different tannins out of them, and that changes the flavor profile. So that's just something that a tip that I always tell people if you like making tea at home, and if you're going to make it fresh with some of the things that you grow, 200 degrees, 5 minutes, and then pour it immediately. Don't pour you a cup and let it sit. Pour it out into like a pitcher where you're off the tea leaves. I do this at home making sweet tea. I'm like, it's 5 minutes, because black tea is the same way. 5 minutes, 200 degrees, and no longer. Because if anytime I forget it, it tastes like complete garbage after a couple of days.
Is there any rule of thumb as to how much of the herb you put to a cup of tea? That's where I've had a problem either.
A lot of times you can take dehydrated herbs and you can reconstitute them in there. But a lot of times it really depends. Herbal teas, you're probably like 1 to 2 tablespoons of dried herbs to maybe 12 ounces of water is pretty common. It just depends. And if you make it at the right like concentration, you won't be one of those people that are going to drink like a whole bunch of tea. You'll get what you needed out of it. Your body kind of, your receptors will realize like, I don't need to drink a big giant cup of this tea. So I got a very concentrated, good tasting cup, and I don't need it. One of my other favorite ways to utilize some of your more savory herbs is to make homemade butter. And we'll infuse like rosemary. You can infuse oregano. Infuse those in butter. Cool them down. and then I can keep that in the refrigerator for several weeks and utilize that in cooking. So a lot of your preservation techniques outside of like dehydrating are not going to yield you a crazy long shelf life, because you know there's always going to be some moisture in here. It's difficult to know you got it all out. So you've got to use the things that you create in preservation other than dried herbs. And even dried herbs, one of the tips I could tell you, because that's mostly how I do it, you know, most people are going to dry them, they're going to put them in a jar and put a lid on it. Get on Amazon and get like the little contraption you can stick over the top that will vacuum seal the lid. We just use the standard lids, not the rings. I don't need the ring, but you can put that lid on there, you stick it on there, and it'll vacuum press it down and suck all the air out of it. It will keep those herbs from caking up without having to add like anti-caking agents like you get in store-bought herbs, like dried herbs. You know, because you know you buy dried herbs and you know how they're always loose. That doesn't happen. If there's any kind of air in there, there's moisture in that air, and it will cause it to cake, and it will cause the shelf life to go down. I've found that by having that little device that I can stick over the jar, suck all the air out of it, it's been immensely increasing the shelf life I get out of a home dried herbs, because I can't leave them in, you know, in the little spice drawer for a year like I can the store-bought stuff, or however long if it's something I don't use a lot of. You can also make other ways that you can preserve that are really, really simple. You can take some of these same things, we can bruise them or muddle them, then we can take them and we can heat up olive oil, and we can pour oil over these in a container, and we can let it sit for probably 1 to 2 weeks, and we can let those flavors infuse out of our herbs, and then we can strain it out, and then we have essentially herb infused olive oils that we can use in the kitchen. We can also do this with vinegar. If you like making your own salad dressings, or even if you don't, you haven't, it's a great way that you can make things for creating different vinaigrettes. You can create different salad dressings, like dill and vinegar works really well. Those are things that you can use pretty diversely and have a decent shelf life. You're infusing your vinegars with, or your olive oils, it's going to decrease your shelf life on them, so you do need to use them. Don't make a giant batch of them unless you're going to disperse them amongst your friends or other people, because the shelf life is already going to be, I would say 4, maybe a month long. It's not going to last super long. So create small batches as you go, but you've got to heat that vinegar, heat that oil up, and put it over bruised leaves to extract the oils out of it. See, there was one more that I'm drawing a blank on. Maybe it'll come back to me in a minute. And that's it, pretty much. Is there any questions or anything that you want to know that I missed out on or might have forgotten today?
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
How do you produce leaves?
So there's a couple different ways, and it can be overdone. So basically you can take, like we could take like lemon balm, for instance. You know, these leaves are kind of delicate. So when we're taking them, we're removing the stems from them. And what I would do is I put this like in a small, I get all my leaves. Ideally what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash them first, and I need them to be dry. I gently wash them to make sure I got anything off of them, because if we're going to put them into something for preservation, we want to make sure they're clean, because like anything else, if it's not clean, we could be putting, some kind of bacteria or something on the leaf into something, and it's going to spoil what we're doing. So we're going to get all our stuff, we're going to lightly rinse it, we're going to spread them out, and we're going to make sure that they're dry. And then you can simply take a spoon or really anything, and we can gently press on them, 3 to 4 times. You don't want to do it too much, because if you over-release, you can actually release chlorophyll, which will cause some of your herbs to get kind of bitter tasting. Or you can do, if anybody's ever been to a fancy cocktail restaurant, you can smack them It's essentially the same concept. You're releasing those oils, because what you're doing, you're trying to achieve. I love herbs in a sensory standpoint too, because I can just go out there and I just walk out and just smell like it. I have a terrible sense of smell. When I had this going, my wife said it smelled like rosemary in here, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it doesn't smell like anything. But this is a great way to open up your senses, and it's the true way. Like when you buy different herbs and you're like lemon balm, it doesn't. You smell it and you don't smell anything. You open it up and you can see where it comes from. Especially mint, some of the crazy mints that are out there, like pineapple mint. It smells like pineapple. It's wild. But essentially, yeah, you're bruising them. Some of these, like rosemary, you don't necessarily you don't need to bruise this. You can de-stem it. There's little tools where you can like drag it through, because this is very sticky. Rosemary is very sappy. Your fingers will be all sticky, but you can take it and then you can chop it. And when you're chopping it, because this is more like a succulent-esque type leaf, you're going to expose some of the internals, and you'll be able to extract those flavors from it. But that's essentially all you're doing, is you're mimicking rubbing on it, but you're pressing it to release those compounds.
You just do that right before you use it for something, cooking or
Yep.
cookies? Okay.
And I don't know if anybody knows, this is unrelated, but people talk about like lemongrass and things. When lemongrass is an herb, like true lemongrass, they talk about how it repels mosquitoes. It only repels mosquitoes if the oils and those compounds are released. So if you have some of these like insect repellent things, like, while insects might be able to smell them more than we can, but if we want them to stay away from us, you can exactly do that. You can bruise them, rub them, heat them up, put them in your pocket, and you get those aromas. And sometimes we might not be able to smell it, but other things can. What was your other question?
You say put good inputs. I'm brand new.
Okay.
Good inputs to soil. What are good inputs?
What inputs? So always using, compost, adding organic matter back to the soil. There are very few things that we grow as home gardeners in the vegetable world that does not like organic matter. So essentially, organic matter is anything that was living that is dying. So like you can take the neighbor here, and you look out the window, the tree that's dying, that's going to turn into organic matter. It is at some point way down the road going to turn to compost. So every bag of compost, every bag of soil that you purchase or you create comes from decaying matter. So that could be leaves, it could be green material like grass. That all can turn into, it's all going to turn into soil eventually. It's going to turn into detritus material. It's going to turn into humus, which is, or actually going to turn into mulch first. Then it's going to turn into humus, which is between mulch and compost. Then it's going to get finer and it's going to become compost. And eventually it's going to become soil, very fine soil. So as you see things break down, that's what you're doing. You're adding things that allow microbes in the invisible soil web we have feed and stay alive. If your soil lacks those things that are breaking down, then the microbial life in the soil doesn't have anything to continue to thrive on. But then also providing, if you're just starting out, you have to build up good soil. And ideally for me, my goal is to reach like permanent sustainability, or like the concept of permaculture, where I don't have any inputs. I'm no longer fertilizing. The soil is taking care of itself. I'm putting compost in, things are growing, they're flourishing. The soil has reached a point where it takes care of itself. But until then, I have to supply things that, like fertilizer, like slow release organics, like Nelson Plant Food is good, they're organic. Microlife is one I talk about. A lot of these are inoculated with a lot of these good microbes. They're going to have sugars and carbons that are going to feed the soil. Whereas if you go and you take the old school or the mass agricultural approach of like triple 13s and man-made synthetic sources, you're putting a Band-Aid effect on the soil. You're getting results, but your soil will be just as poor today, and it will be the same 20 years from now, because there's nothing in there that's actually promoting soil being a living thing. You deplete your soil, so that's where people get pest problems, disease problems, because you're lacking a healthy soil. Does that make sense? All right, cool. What other questions? What's that? Yeah, kitchen scraps in your compost. You know, if you're making a compost, obviously like explore and research, because there are certain things that you don't want to put in your compost. You know, meats and dairies don't go in compost. Eggshells can go in if they're, you got a lot of people microwave them to kill all the contaminants in them before you put them in, because you don't want to be introducing bad pathogens and bacteria into your compost. You don't put diseased leaves, or like if you're trimming your plants and they look like there might be something wrong with them, you don't put those in your compost pile. You know, you put fresh, healthy material that's being removed. You know, kitchen scraps, dead leaves, brown materials, and you can break those down and utilize that. You know, and if you don't have room for compost, you can buy it. So.
Do you use cardboard?
I don't, but yeah, I mean, when you're starting out, cardboard is good. In a sense, it's going to attract microbes. You put cardboard down as a weed barrier. It's going to bring in earthworms and microbes, and they'll break that cardboard down and it'll disappear in about a 12-month time. The only thing that'll be left is tape, if there was any. But, you know, you can get on the internet, and cardboard's a controversial topic because some people think cardboard's full of chemicals, and sure, I mean, everything is a chemical, but it will work better than putting weed barrier or other things down.
What about horse manure?
If it's composted, sure. Like very well composted.
Not fresh.
Not fresh. The only kind of fresh manure you can use is rabbit manure. Rabbit manure is a cold manure. That rabbit can literally drop the droppings and you can put it in there and it will be fine. Any other type of litter has got to be well composted. I always advocate people, even though like I sell it, because you know, unfortunately I'm in a world where like I have to make a living and I can't change everybody's minds about how we should or shouldn't do something, because we all have our own opinions. Avoid chicken manure unless you're making chicken compost from your own chickens. Commercialized chickens are gross, disgusting, and there's no telling what's in it. Same thing for cattle manure. Cattle manure is a little less evasive, but you know, you don't know what was fed to animals, and once something is put into an animal, it's still there. Like, it doesn't go away. Trace amounts can always be found. What other questions?
How do we cut mint to harvest it? Where do you cut it at?
So most of them you're going to cut like plants like mint. Sorry, it's a very good question because I forgot that one. Let's find a better looking one. So typically when we're cutting on a lot of these, we're going to cut to, if we want to cut a sprig, we're going to cut right above the leaf node. So where we have new foliage out here, we're going to cut right above that. And most of the time I'm going to cut everything at an angle if I can to help water shed off of a cut. It seems really silly, but when water sits on an open wound, you can get rot. You can see the stems brown. But you know, you just essentially pick where you want to cut it off a stem and cut it right above where you have two leaves. And then you're going to see branching happen, and that's how you get your herbs to be more compact as they grow, because mint can get really leggy and it'll just kind of flow, but you can keep it more compact and bushy by constantly like cutting a little bit off of it and causing it to branch.
And it's the same for like the mojito mint?
Yep, all of them. Anything else?
I've always planting herbs like small seeds like the regular parsley and stuff. What would you recommend? Because I've always had a hard time getting it.
Like by seed? Some of the really, really tiny seeds are hard. It's really, with anything, it's all about consistency of temperature. If you struggle getting them up, do you use a heat mat? I would recommend a heat mat, like Amazon. Like, that's a game changer for me. Like in this house, like when we do seed starting workshops, I always give the example. I had a 0% success rate in this house, even with the heater on for starting seeds. It's insulated, everything, but it was still too cool in here. I couldn't get the right temperature and I couldn't keep it consistently. So bottom watering, I put all my seedlings in a flood tray now, and I flood the tray and I let the soil soak it up. And then I put a heat mat underneath the bottom of my flood tray to keep the soil warm. Now I have like 95% success rate. Controlling your variables, and then also using a very, very loose, airy soil. Seed starting mix. If you do that, but most of the time I find when seed starting is not successful, it's because of temperature and moisture. And that's where I find bottom watering, because I can see the soil color change when it's dry. When I pour it in the bottom, within 10, 15 minutes, you can see the color begin to change in the top layer. And then knowing that I have that consistent temperature makes all the difference. Grow light, I mean, once they come up, you're going to need that grow light. Just make sure it's about 2 inches above. If it's way up here, your seedlings are going to get leggy, and they're going to get stressed, and then when you go to put them out, they're going to struggle. Anything else today? Cool. I appreciate everyone. Thank you for coming, and thanks for your time.
African blue?
That one is, she didn't have any African blue. That came from Des. This was, I think this was Thai basil.
Okay, that's
And then
what I
that
had
was like
at
the purple stem was cinnamon basil.
So this right here should be pinched off, or you can just.
That one, a lot of your ones that flower, like African blue or Thai or cinnamon, the flavor of the leaves don't really change a whole lot if you let it flower. We just let ours flower. Like, but if it's Italian basil or Genovese basil, yes, pinch them off because the flavor will change.
Sweet.
I don't have any sweet basil. I don't grow sweet basil.
Well, I have some.
Yeah.
That one you pinch the flowers off.
Yeah, because your flavor will change and it'll get kind of bitter.
This
Going to